Maybe we can just begin. Welcome to our webinar, Ek Khaale, Preserving Rohingya Visual History. Today, we'll explore the importance of visual storytelling in preserving cultural identity and resilience. We are honored to have Greg Constantine sharing his insights into the project. The agenda is very simple, and we have his presentation, community voices, a poem recitation, and towards the end, we'll have a Q&A. As you all would have already noticed that the webinar is being recorded, and we encourage your active participation to make it more meaningful. Throughout the entire webinar, please use the chat function to put in your questions. We'll take it towards the end. We have just kept about 10 minutes, but we hope to have a longer one. Over to you, Hafsar, for the first bit on opening the webinar and setting the tone.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the webinar, and thank you so much for making the time to celebrate this Genocides Remembrance Day with us. Today indeed is quite a difficult day for many of us, many Rohingya communities and all of us. As we mark the 7 years of Genocides Remembrance Day, we honor the many innocent Rohingya lives that have been taken during 27 and as of now being taken. We organized this webinar for two main purposes. One is to raise awareness and also remind that Rohingya's issues that we have been talking about is far from being resolved in many ways, shape, or form, and Rohingyas belonging to Myanmar Burma. For many decades, we Rohingya have endured injustice, oppression, and atrocities against us in many forms inside the country, in refugee camps and other host refugee countries. Our existence has been constantly challenged in many decades, which Greg will tell us more about it. Also, our belonging to Myanmar Burma has been constantly questioned by many, although our ancestors have lived in Burma for many decades and fought for the independence of Burma together with General Aung San and many others. As a result of systemic and prolonged persecution and atrocities against us, now our written language has become not very known to many younger generation of us, and our culture, our traditions, and many other essential elements that are core to our identity and sense of belonging has been destroyed. It is a very terrible method of destruction of an ethnicity and our existence in Arakan and in Myanmar Burma. As we tirelessly work very hard to find sustainable, comprehensive, practical, immediate, short-term, medium-term, and long-term solution for Rohingyas, restoring our identity and sense of belonging and reclaiming our rights is vital. As the oppressed community, ultimately, our community's belongings and rights must be and should be acknowledged, so we are able to rebuild our community and reclaim when and if our rights, when and if repatriation or resettlement happens, or we are able to have dignified human lives wherever Rohingyas are displaced right now, whether be trapped inside the country, in refugee camps, or in host communities. As the community that has never received adequate and practical interventions or support from international communities, we hope that this webinar will remind us about the many innocent lives that were taken during 2012, 2017, and as of now. And this webinar will also encourage us to have discussion about how do we go forward to actually practically respond comprehensive way to resolve Rohingya issues, and also remind us that the genocide of Rohingya is not over, and remind and call on the accountabilities and responsibilities of international communities and state and organizations. And with that, I will leave it to give back to you, Amrita, so Greg can take us through this webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Hafsar, for that. And yes, I had watched a bit of the presentation, and I've gone through the website, the Ek Khaale website, and it was phenomenal. I'm not going to hold back, and I'm not going to take any more time. So over to you, Greg. Walk us through the website and the work, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And I first want to just say that I'm incredibly, grateful to be a part of this webinar today and to be joined and to be joining colleagues from the Rohingya community, many of who I know have known for a while now. And also at the same time, I really appreciate APRRN for inviting me and organizing this on such an important day. Um, I'm going to be showing a lot of photographs, and I'm going to be telling a lot of stories. And I will let my Rohingya colleagues on the panel talk about the community itself. But I think my role here is to kind of share the Ek Khaale project and go from there. So I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. So I'm going to start with a few stories first and go from there. Wajid Ullah was born in Mungdal in northern Arakan on December 11th, 1919. By the time he was 26 years old in 1945, World War II was over, but like other men from the Rohingya community, or the Karen, or the Kachin, or the Chin, Wajidullah had seen the war against the Japanese from the front lines. He had served for the British and was one of the most respected interpreters in the guerrilla unit called V-Force. The British had created V-Force in North Arakan, and Rohingya men living behind Japanese enemy lines served as scouts and intelligence agents, providing information about Japanese troop movements and positions to the British. And like other young men throughout Burma from all different communities, the war had disrupted the education of an entire generation. And with the war over and a strong desire to learn, in 1945, Wajid Ullah traveled to Calcutta to attend university. On March 23rd, 1946, Wajidullah sat down and wrote a letter to his friend and his former commanding officer from the British Army named Major Anthony Irwin. This is an actual letter of that. This is in the original copy of the letter that was dated on March 23rd, 46. And one of the paragraphs, the third one down, reads this: In Burma and in many other places, all the people are rioting and demonstrating for freedom. But in fact, I do not agree with the demonstrators and the rioters. I am all for the Constitution. I want the Constitution to be an honest master. If freedom will come, it will come constitutionally. It is right to ask for freedom, but to do the right thing the wrong way is equally wrong. This is the active voice of a Rohingya in 1946, before Burma was independent, before the Constituent Assembly was created. And in this letter, he shows a deep belief in the rule of law, not man, would provide equality to ethnic minorities in Burma. It's a powerful statement of a Rohingya belonging and solidarity with all other communities in Burma at the time. Soon, a constituent assembly would be elected in the spring of 1947. Burma's constitution would be drafted and revised several times. And on the front page of the December 1947, December 29th, 1947 issue of the Burmese Review, the headline would read, "On the Threshold of Freedom." The rest is actually history. Unfortunately, Wajidullah and the stories of others like him and their part in this history have disappeared and have been totally forgotten. Fast forward just over 40 years to 1988. Mohammed was in his 20s and student demonstrations were sweeping across Burma. August 1988 was a tense month. But then in September, the violence and the crackdown. Mohammed had proudly joined the demonstrators. When the military came to his home looking for him, Mohammed's father lied about his whereabouts. Eventually, Mohammed was arrested and tortured for joining the students. Mohammed would say to me in an interview, when the demonstrations for democracy started in 1988, being a student, I was involved. I thought it was very necessary that if democracy came to the country, then all the Rohingyas will have rights as before. Since the 1982 Black Law was adopted, although the Rohingya community was deprived of Burmese citizenship, all the ethnic communities of Burma, regardless of ethnicity and race, had an opportunity to protest together. We all ran together. It was a proud moment. And as a Rohingya, we fought for the country's democracy in 1988 because we had full trust and evidence that we are an original community from Burma. We fought together, hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder, with the aim of being able to have equality if democracy was restored. This is an array of photographs of different newspapers and magazines from 1988. And this is the photograph on the left is a photograph from the September 9th issue of the Burmese edition of the Working People's Daily, showing a photograph of student protesters. And in the far left-hand corner are a group holding a banner, or a group of Rohingya protesting alongside others on that day in 1988. My name is Greg Constantine, and I'm a documentary photojournalist. And I've been photographing the Rohingya now for 18 years. I've made over 25 trips to Burma and Bangladesh since 2006. I was blacklisted from Burma in 2016 because of my work on the Rohingya. I was in Bangladesh in 2017, and I've traveled back to Bangladesh 4 times since then. 7 years after the atrocities of 2017, we continue to talk about genocide. Justice has still not been served. But since the coup in 2021, people from all over Burma have seen the same regime escalate violence and atrocities against their own communities throughout Burma. And just like the Rohingya, thousands of people throughout Burma have been forced to leave their homes and now are in other countries, waiting for the day they can return home. The stories of killings and death and displacement all over Burma since 2021 are widespread, as they have been since 2017 and beforehand. But what of another kind of destruction that no one seems to talk about? And that is the focus of Ek Khaale. What of a destruction that does not make the headlines? A destruction that so many communities, just like the Rohingya around the world, are vulnerable to. In 2018, a Rohingya elder said this to me: "The world didn't see how they have systematically destroyed our legal documents and other evidence. The world just saw the physical attacks on us. So they are trying to deceive the world by saying the Rohingya are not from here. What they did with the pen harmed us more than their physical attacks did. It's like destroying the roots of a tree. That's the actual genocide." Today, the image most people in the world have of the Rohingya is an image that is very much portrayed by displacement, violence, otherness, persecution, and victimhood. Successive regimes in Burma and others have rejected a community called the Rohingya. They've rejected Rohingya history, and Rohingya claims to belonging to Burma have been questioned, contested, rejected, and erased. This narrative, rejecting the belonging and recognition of the Rohingya, has been widely accepted by others in Burma. 6 decades of violence, forced displacement, and the physical destruction of documentary heritage has dismantled ways the Rohingya preserve, share, and endorse cultural memory and identity among themselves and with others. It has also limited their ability to contest those claims Burmese regimes have imposed upon them. For the past 3 years, I've been working with teams of Rohingya around the world on this project called Ek Khaale. And Ek Khaale is the Rohingya expression for once upon a time. Together, we have been searching for old visual materials still in the possession of Rohingya. Old photographs, documents, ID cards, diaries, letters, anything that is visual. These materials are rare and they are absolutely priceless. We have no idea how much has actually been destroyed over the past 60 years. Rohingya villages have been destroyed, personal materials confiscated by governments over the years, fires and floods every single year in the refugee camps, and the recent destruction of Rohingya property in Arakan over the past 6 months to a year. But what we have been able to find, primarily through the active participation of Rohingya themselves, is actually incredible. This project brings all of these materials together to show a Rohingya community that really no one has ever seen before. These materials show a Rohingya community with deep roots in Burma, a community that was recognized, that actively participated in Burma's political life, social life, and academic life. It shows a community that looks very different. This project challenges the narratives Burmese regimes have spread all of these decades, and it provides a counter history and a counter narrative, not through text, but through visuals. One of the many gifts that an archive gives is that it can wake up the voice from the past. Voices or people from the past that have long been forgotten, and it places them into the present, right here, right now. These photographs and the materials that together we've been able to find, primarily that Rohingya have contributed to this project, have, how I describe it, they've been sleeping for decades. And this project now allows them to wake up and to speak. The project Ek Khaale forces us to reimagine the Rohingya community. It presents a visual representation of the Rohingya and their history that the Burmese authorities have done everything in its power to destroy and erase. So that is really kind of, sorry, that's my scripted section of my presentation. From now on in, I'm going to walk through sections of the website and describe kind of what we've seen. The website is broken up. It's almost like a web book. It's broken into 7 or 9 different chapters, and each chapter is interrelated and has Rohingya voices woven in and out of it from the past and Rohingya voices from the present, almost speaking together, where time is almost erased to where the past and the present come together to create a collective voice. But this first chapter that I'm going to share with all of you, it's called They Did Not Deny Us. And this is a chapter that really talks about it's a very deep history kind of chapter. And really the intent of this chapter is to show the presence of a Muslim community in North Arakan dating back several hundred years, and almost trying to connect the dots from there to the current Rohingya community that has claimed Arakan as its homeland and that currently still lives there. And we use a number of different kind of materials. As over the past 3 years, as Rohingya have been out collecting materials, I had the very good fortune of being based in London for almost a year. And I did some deep archival material. A lot of these materials are materials that other people have written about in books. Rohingya have written about them. Non-Rohingya have written about them. But this particular project is not about telling people. It's actually about showing people these connections in this history. And so I'll dive into a few of these right now. In 1676, Walter Schouten traveled to Arakan. He worked for the Dutch East India Company, and he published a book in 1676 all about his adventures there, which included a whole entire chapter all about Arakan, and also mentions in there the Muslim community in Arakan at the time. This next one is the, pardon me, I'm going to go here. The English historian published a series of books. Thomas Sulman, a series of books, a whole volume about the people in communities all around the world. And in this volume, it included a volume about the people of Arakan, including the Muslim community in Arakan at the time, and that was published in 1738. Rohingya often talk about the significance of Francis Buchanan. Francis Buchanan was a doctor and a botanist, and he served for the British East India Company. And in 1795, he traveled to Burma as part of a diplomatic mission. And on that mission, he wrote about the people he met on the journey and their languages. And he wrote about the Rohingya people and the Rohingya language. And this is a photograph of an actual copy of one of those old journals from 1795. And what's pulled out is a sentence that is really the first kind of recognized acknowledgement of the Rohingya language. He went on to then publish something in 1799 in Asiatic Researches that listed all these different new languages from Burma, and the Rohingya language was included in that report. In 1826, Adrian Balby ended up producing and publishing what you call one of the first linguistic atlases of the world. And this atlas listed all of the languages found in all the different regions of the world at that time. And in 1826, in the Asiatic languages section of this language atlas, he actually lists the Rohingya language as one of the part of the family of languages of people in Asia at the time. And that was 1826. Architectural surveys were also done in Burma in the late 1800s, which talked about the different architectures throughout Arakan and North Arakan. And Emil Fromchammer was a Swiss scholar and the first head of the archaeological survey of Burma at that time. And he traveled to Arakan and in those original journals that were published at that time, there were several plates, actual photographs published of mosques in North Arakan, which again shows the presence of a Muslim community that dates back prior to 1824. If you look back at various censuses over the years, going back to the very first census that was done in 1872, I mean, one of the things that is highlighted in this is not so much the statistics and the data, but it's actually the summaries in each one of these censuses. And if you look back in the summaries, dating all the way back to 1872 and moving forward to even to 1911 and 1921 and 1931, in the summaries, they always talk about how the Muslim community should be considered indigenous to Burma. And this is also at a time when there was a lot of migration coming to and from India into Burma, because it was all part of British India. But even with that migration, these summaries highlight how the Muslim community in Arakan should be considered as indigenous to the country. We fast forward quite a bit because I'll go back, but this chapter is also trying to show how Rohingya fall into "they did not deny us," that Rohingya were actually accepted and included in the political landscape of Burma at the time. I went back and spent well over a month going through all the different English language newspapers throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. And Rohingya have talked about how members of their community were elected as members of parliament, but we can't tell that. The project has to show that. So this is on the front page of the Nation newspaper in 1951, announcing the election of Sultan Ahmet as a member of parliament. And the 1956 front page of the Sunday Nation, which lists Sultan Ahmet and Abdul Bashar and Abdul Ghaffar as being elected as members of parliament as well. We fast forward again to 1961, and this is another significant part that Rohingya talk about themselves. And this was, ethnic communities all around Burma had their own, in Burma Broadcasting, that were allocated time on the Burma Broadcasting Service to talk about the news and other things in their own language. And at that particular time, it was very much a recognition of a community that was accepted and belonged to the family of the nation of Burma at that time. And in 1961, on the front page of, I believe this was The Nation, is the announcement of the addition of the Rohingya radio program in 1960 and 1961. In 2018, I had the privilege of meeting Irshad Hussain in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. Irshad was 106 years old when I met him. And the significance of him is that he was one of the original Rohingya broadcasters on the Rohingya radio program back in the 1960s. He unfortunately passed away, I believe it was in 2020, but it's also shows you how important, I guess, this kind of a project is, because it really it memorializes people who are really significant to greater history, not just Rohingya history, but the Rohingya inclusion in those radio programs is significant to Burma's history as well. We go in now to the next chapter of the project, which is called the Forgotten. And this particular chapter very much focuses on World War II. And like many other ethnic communities throughout Burma, the Rohingya supported the British forces against the Japanese. And one of the things that was found in this project, in late 2022, one of the team members who was living inside of North Arakan at the time came across a portfolio of documents of one man. And this man's name was Abdul Salam. And he found an original passport issued to him in 1949, but most significantly, he found an original war service certificate that was granted to Abdul Salam on June 14, 1945, for his services rendered to the persecution of the war in Burma. And this certificate was issued by the governor of Burma. Once we found this document, and as you can tell, I'm going to tell some stories behind some of the stories of these documents, but this then sent me on a journey that lasted several months. And one of the things was I was introduced to a book by Anthony Irwin, who was a British soldier who fought in North Arakan during the war in 1943 and early 1944. And he wrote this book called Burmese Outposts. A lot of people are familiar with it. I had never read it before. But after one of the team members had found these original documents, I started looking into V-Force and came across this book. And in this book, there are 3 chapters. And in the first chapter, it's all dedicated to talking about Anthony Irwin talking about the Muslim community of North Arakan. And in that book, he mentions the names of several specific Rohingya. And miraculously, one of the people that he mentions is Abdul Salam, who we ended up finding the documents for. I ended up, because I was in the UK, spent several weeks trying to find the family of Anthony Irwin, the descendants of Anthony Irwin. And over a series of pretty incredible events, I was introduced to the son and the daughter of Anthony Irwin. The son is now in his early 80s. The daughter is in her late 70s. And I told her about this project. And she said, I think you need to come to my house. So I jumped on a bus and went to a very small village outside of Oxford and went and met her at her house. And inside her house, on the dining room floor, were these 2 1940-style suitcases opened up on the floor with papers, journals, diaries, and photo albums of her father writing about his time serving for the British with Rohingya and other communities in North Arakan during 1943 and 1944. And one of those photo albums was this photo album that she handed to me. She said, I have two things that I think are of significant interest. And one was this. And on the spine is written Arakan 1943. And the most significant part is on the first pages that when I opened up this photo album are these two photographs taken in 1943. And the photograph, the large photograph here, is of her father, Anthony Irwin, with his shirt off, standing underneath the Union Jack, with a whole entire group of young Rohingya scouts and intelligence agents serving for the British in 1943. This photograph was taken at guerrilla headquarters in Tong Bazaar, and that's written in his hand on the back of that photograph. So it shows active participation of the Rohingya community in the war efforts against the Japanese. As well were personal diaries. And one of these diaries had several pages of names, handwritten names of all sorts of different Rohingya men, from headmen to school teachers to mullahs, who were all kind of the leads in V-Force serving for the British during that particular time. And one of those names, or actually three of those names, we have actually found the original documents of, the national registration cards or original passports. And Abdul Salam is written in the middle of that one page that's on the right-hand side. But on that particular day, on June 14th, 1945, Abdul Salam was not the only Rohingya who received a war service certificate. On the Burma Gazette, on June 14th, 1945, on the same exact day, listed underneath war certificates is Abdul Salam's name, but also the names of 7 other men from the Rohingya community in North Arakan who also received war service certificates. So it wasn't just one man, but it was men from a whole entire community being recognized. The next chapter that I go into is called A New Nation. And this is a chapter that really focuses on the time leading up to Burma's independence and Burma's independence. And some of the things, and I'm just highlighting moments of these chapters, but there's several different things that came out. In February of 1947, a report was commissioned to talk about the future status of Indians and their rights under the new constitution of Burma. Again, this is before the constituent assemblies were elected. And in that report, it basically suggests that anyone that spoke 6 different South Asian Indian languages should be all lumped together to be considered into one political minority, the Indian minority of Burma. And at that particular time, being identified as Indian took on a lot of stereotypes and stigmas. And one of the things that came out of that is that would end up affecting electoral rolls, your ability to register to vote, your ability to run for office in the constituent assemblies. But what I was also able to find in some of the archives was this original cable that was written 2 days after, that was sent 2 days after that report was submitted. And in this cable, there was a mass meeting of Muslims in Mongdal and Buthadong on the 17th of February, 1945, protesting against being classified as Indians and urging the government to take immediate steps to rectify this gross injustice by declaring them Burmans. Meaning that here you have members of the Rohingya community saying, we are not foreigners, we are actually people from Burma, and we are staking our claim at that. So what you'll see with this project is always trying to bring up the active voice, the active participation of Rohingya in these larger moments of Burmese history. These are the election results of the Constituent Assembly in 1947, with Sultan Ahmet and Abdul Ghaffar from the Rohingya community of North Arakan both being elected into the Constituent Assembly. And the background image is a paper where during those negotiations during the Constituent Assembly, a special committee was set up to specifically talk about fundamental rights and more specifically about citizenship. And one of the people that was on that committee that talked about citizenship and how it would end up reflecting in the first constitution was Sultan Ahmet from the Rohingya community of North Arakan. throughout this project, what's happened is that these amazing teams of young Rohingya have gone out into their communities, told people about this project, and asked people for what they still might have with them. And individual Rohingya would contribute individual pieces of materials or a document or a photograph or something like this. And as the project was going on, all these things were almost submitted in isolation of each other. And so on my first trip to Bangladesh in 2020, last year in 2024, I worked with all the different team members to go back and revisit people who they had met with so that I could interview them, but also that we could take higher quality pictures, because everything has been done original on iPhones through a really secure system that I set up. But what ended up happening was that Rohingya not only would share one page of a document, but they started sharing entire portfolios of documents that almost tell the story of one family or several generations of one family. And so what I'm going to share with you right now is a series of pictures of these. This is a collage work of one family's land ownership documents that go back to the very early 1900s. Or these would be the documents of two generations of one family who were both policemen during the 1950s, 60s, up until the 1980s. These would be the policeman ID cards, good service certificates, his pension book, because he was a government worker, and to be a government worker you had to be a citizen. Therefore, he received a pension, and the do's and don'ts of being a policeman at that particular time in a little booklet. This would be a collage of one man's whole entire professional life. He in 1961 first became an employee of Burma Telecom, and then he transitioned and became a postman. And these are all the documents of him being a postman: his postman's ID, his first with Burma Telecom ID, his pension book, his NRC card, several pages of documents that list the names of all of the postmen in Arakan Rakhine state at that time, Rakhine as well as Rohingya, and a photograph of the gentleman now retired, who was retired, with two of his former postal workers in North Rakhine as well. This is a 12-page handwritten document that two brothers got together before one of them fell sick and was ill. And the two brothers got together and they hand wrote. They went back as far as they could into their family tree. And over these 12 pages, they filled them with the whole entire family tree of their family. And that family tree goes all the way back to 1868. The document on the left is one of the oldest documents that we were able to find. This is a land ownership document issued to Rohingya in 1881. And the document on the right is a land ownership document that was issued on a piece of fabric at that time in 1915. Or this land ownership document that was inscribed into a piece of bamboo and is dated 1892. The next chapter we go into is called "We Were All Citizens," and throughout the project, one of the things that has been a lot have been contributed are original national registration cards. A lot of them issued in the 1950s. Over the years, these NRC cards, a lot of them have been confiscated. And miraculously, Rohingya have held on to them. And I've seen these cards before, but throughout the course of the 3 years of working on this project, I don't think I've ever seen this amount of NRC cards. But the NRC card for Rohingya takes on a very important meaning. It is that stamp of citizenship, recognition, acknowledgement of citizenship at that time of your ancestry. But also at the same time, as a photographer, it's the physical object itself tells a story as well. The rips, the tears, the faded photographs, the measures that were taken by Rohingya to preserve these priceless artifacts, these documents that in many ways have no value today, but at the same time hold a huge and significant value in the bigger picture of the Rohingya story. One of the most interesting NRC cards that was found was the one on the left. This is an NRC card of a man named Olamia. And he was actually, one of his name was actually listed on the pages of the diary of Anthony Irwin that we were able to find. But the significant part of his NRC card is that one of the first places in all of Burma where people were issued NRC cards was a pilot program in Arakan State. And this was primarily because it was to track down or to cut down on migration going to and from across the border. And so to get one of these cards, you had to go through a very rigid verification kind of process. And once you were issued this, it was because you went through that verification. But the significant part of Olamia's card is the number on it. His number is 000025. And we believe that this is one of the earliest NRC cards issued in Burma at the time. Or the thread that is sewn through the binding of this little boy's NRC card to preserve it. Or again, all of the rips and tears and the faded photographs. Each one tells a significant story, but actually when you present all of them together, and we have well over 100 of them, when you present all of them together as a collective, it tells a much bigger, kind of deeper story. So I'll go into the next chapter of the website, and this is a chapter that's all on resistance. This chapter was released just a few weeks ago. There's 2 more chapters to be released on the website. They'll be released in the beginning of September. I'm going to give everybody a sneak peek at them right now. But this chapter is all on resistance. And the purpose for this is to show that Rohingya, just like other communities all around Burma, played an active role in not only politically, but also in the political forum, but also in armed struggle against an increasingly oppressive Burmese regime over the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the 80s. And that there almost came a point in time where the efforts of Rohingya on the political stage really was producing no results for the community, and that meant turning to the jungles for resistance. Again, just like other communities across Burma at the time. This is a document that was written typed in 1949, and in 1949, violence in North Arakan, well, there was violence all over Burma at the time, but violence in North Arakan had actually pushed several thousand Rohingya over the border into Bangladesh. And this is a letter that was written by the Central Arakanese Refugee Organization out of Teknaf. And one of the significant things about this is that it's basically saying that the committee has requested to the Burmese authorities to help create stability and to stop the oppression that was taking place against the Rohingya community at that time. But the most significant part is the bottom paragraph, which basically says, the top paragraph, which basically says that they cannot trust and rely on the central government anymore. Therefore, it is high time for them to get their men prepared for their own defense and restoration of rights and tranquility in North Arakan. So this is really kind of one of those beginning stages of the resistance movements of Rohingya going back into the 1940s. Also throughout this project, we find op-ed pieces that were written by Rohingya in the newspapers during the 1950s and the 1960s. And this is one that was written by Sultan Ahmet. During the late 1950s, there was a huge push by the Rakhine Buddhist community for the establishment of an Arakan state, which would end up being administered by the Rakhine Buddhist community, and the Rohingya community and other Muslims in Arakan were very much opposed to this, fearful that this Buddhist-dominated state would then cause a lot of problems for them. And they were actively involved in the opposition of the creation of an Arakan state. And this is an op-ed written by Sultan Ahmet at that time, talking about the opposition of an Arakan state and why the Muslim community in North Arakan felt that way. But also through this project, what's been pretty amazing is that Rohingya have shared original old documents with the project. I had seen a few of these before, but never to this extent. But basically, almost all the different iterations of Rohingya liberation groups going back in the 1970s published their own magazine or their own journal. And they ranged from being just a few pages long to sometimes over 30 pages long. And in those documents or in those journals and publications, they talked about not only the news that was happening in Burma at the time, but what was happening to the Rohingya community and what needed to be done to restore Rohingya rights and to stop violence targeting the Rohingya community. And these magazines were published well over, over the course of 40 years. And one of the things that was found during this project were original copies of several of these old journals written and created by different iterations of Rohingya liberation groups. And in them, they're incredibly powerful. The active voice of Rohingya throughout the decades in these journals. But also at the same time are original photographs of Rohingya training in the jungles along the Burma-Bangladesh border in the 1980s and the 1990s, just average daily life of what a lot of those fighters were living at that particular time, and also original photographs of protests of Rohingya in southern Bangladesh after both of the waves of violence in 1978 and 1992. So again, this is not showing not showing the Rohingya as being passive in history. It's actually showing Rohingya as being active participants in shaping their history against all odds. Now, these last two chapters are chapters that have not been published on the website yet, but I'm going to share them with you right now. And chapter number 8 is called Students and Teachers. And really, these last chapters transition the whole entire project from being heavy in archival materials really to highlighting those materials that Rohingya still possess on them today and have actively contributed to this project. And we all know that during the 1950s and the 1960s, Burma had the most prestigious education system in all of Southeast Asia. The universities were the top universities in Southeast Asia, and Rohingya were very much involved in academic life, not only as students, but also as teachers. This is a group photograph of professors and lecturers at Rangoon University in 1954, including sitting in the middle is Mr. Faiz from the Rohingya community. Mr. Faiz was one of the most revered teachers and headmasters from the Rohingya community. He was the headmaster at the state high school in Mungdal and then became the district education officer. He passed away in 1958. But we also have a selection of just group photographs taken back in the 1950s or the one in the upper right-hand corner is a group of Rohingya students who are standing with Mohammed Rashid, who was a very esteemed Burmese Muslim, and one of Aung San's key advisors prior to independence and after independence. And this is a photograph taken of them, I believe, in 1957. This is a photograph of what we would equate to being basically yearbook pages. This is Chokpew Educational College, which is located in Rakhine State. The school opened in 1953, and this publication, these pages from this publication, are portraits of students attending the college in 1965, both Buddhist and Muslim students, including Rohingya students, with other future teachers from the Rakhine Buddhist community as well. And this is a teacher ID card from a Rohingya man at that time, and pages from that yearbook. This photograph has a particular meaning to me personally, and there's a story behind this photograph which I'll share as well. So this is a photograph of the Rangoon University Rohingya students in 1967-68. As I would be talking with Rohingya elders, and I had meetings with a lot of Rohingya elders when I was in the UK during this fellowship. I would carry around a box of photocopies, probably about 100 of them, in my bag, in my book bag, and as I was talking with one man and hearing his story and recording his story, he mentioned that he went to Rangoon University and was in the class of 1967 to 1971. And as I was talking with him, I couldn't help but think that in my box in my book bag was a photocopy of the class of 1967-68. And so I paused our interview, our conversation, and I went to my bag and I pulled out the box and I started sifting through the pictures, and I pulled out this photocopy of this photograph, and I set it down on the coffee table in between the two of us as we were talking. And I said, so you said you went to Rangoon University 1967 to 71. Here is a photograph that has been contributed to the project of the Rangoon University Rohingya students of 1967-68. Are you in this photograph? And he looked at the photograph, and the next thing he said was, yes, there I am, top row, fourth to the left. And he proceeded to then tell me the majors of every single person in that photograph, from studying botany to studying medicine, to one becoming a member of parliament, to one becoming a lawyer, to one of them loving to sing and being competitive with him during college because he loved to sing as well. It added a whole nother layer of texture and storytelling to the photographs, which are included on the website as well. And these kinds of unintended discoveries along the past 3 years have happened over and over and over again. This is a collection of university photographs of one man. He now lives in the camps in Bangladesh, but these are all photographs of him going to Basin University, including a photograph of he and a classmate standing in the middle of Aung San Park in Rangoon, and a very cool photograph of him in the 1970s with his bell-bottom pants on the top. Or a group of Rohingya students at Sitwe University in the late 1970s. or a whole entire portfolio of one young man's university career at Sitwe University. I believe he graduated in 2006, from his student ID cards to his graduation certificate and photographs as well. And the very last chapter is really kind of, I'm not gonna really talk that much, because it's really, I think, probably the most powerful chapter in this whole entire project. It's a collection of just ordinary family photographs, from portraits to group photographs to photographs that really become universal, in a sense, the way that I look at them. They're photographs that show just normal daily life, from weddings to just gatherings. But there's also things that, when you look at these photographs, that, like I said, they're universal, that I think, as I've been showing them, and we've been showing them to people, other people from other ethnic communities across Burma have photographs of their family just looking like this. Or I have a photograph of my ancestry that looks identical to some of these photographs as well. And so I'm just going to slowly go through this last collection, and this is a selection of some of these family photographs that have been contributed to the project. As you can probably see, the project, in many ways, it attempts to do a number of different things. For me, as a photographer who has been photographing, I guess you could say, for the lack of a better word, the persecution against the Rohingya community over all of these years, and in so many ways, the destruction of this community since 2006. One of the unintended consequences of my work, and the work of my peers, other photographers who have been covering and documenting the atrocities against the Rohingya, is that all of our pictures, in some kind of way, have created this constellation of images that have circulated within the media ecosphere, and have almost forged together to almost create the contemporary visual identity that most people have of the Rohingya today. But what's really powerful about this project, speaking for myself, and I'll let colleagues on the panel talk as well, but for me, speaking personally, it's that this project has almost allowed and given me the opportunity to work with Rohingya to challenge that visual identity that, in so many ways, myself and other photographers over the past 20 or 30 years, or even longer, have helped kind of create. And it's been Rohingya themselves who are contributing, actively contributing these. I guess what you could say is, the way that I view them is that each one of these pictures is almost like represents a powerful sentence that's within a paragraph, that then, when you take these paragraphs and you put them all together, it creates a whole different story and narrative visually of the Rohingya community, who they are, who they've been. And in a lot of ways, it forces people to have to reimagine what they've learned about the Rohingya community visually. And this foreignness that has been spread by Burmese authorities over all of these years, and that has been widely accepted by other communities inside of Burma too. But I also think that, you know, this project, it does a number of other things. Is that it creates almost a visual space for shared solidarity um, with the Rohingya community. And it also, in a way, it shows that had none of this violence ever happened, the potential of what the Rohingya community, the trajectory that the Rohingya community was going on, had all this violence starting in basically in 1978 never happened. And that's a really powerful kind of thing. So for me, as a journalist, as a documentary photographer, as a visual storyteller, it's been a real privilege to work on this project in collaboration with the community. And it's really brought my work over the past 18 years completely and totally, I think, full circle. And I believe that this particular project has the capacity to leave something of almost infinite value moving forward in the future, not just to the Rohingya community itself, but to other people in their understanding of the Rohingya who are from other communities in Burma and also to the world. Like I said, the last 2 chapters will be released the beginning of September. And then there'll be a lot of other materials that will be released on different sections of the website. But I just want to thank APRRN again for this amazing opportunity to present the project in this kind of way. And I hope that if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send an email to either of the addresses below, and please share the project widely with colleagues, with friends, with families, with the people who are deniers of this history, and go from there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, for taking us through that journey. I mean, for quite some time, I was enthralled. I knew I will be. So yes, thank you so much. And I don't want, we have a Rohingya poet, and he has penned a beautiful poem on the project. So I invite him, Anamul Hassan, to share the poem with us. Over to you.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rohan, a Rohingya poet based in Process Border Refugee Camp, Bangladesh. Thank you for inviting me to this special webinar and to celebrate also the 7th anniversary of Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day. I was a documentary researcher for this project, Ek Khaale, which I believe is one of the best projects I have ever worked on, which focuses the identity and history of my Rohingya community. The idea of collecting documents was an excellent idea made by the great. We are truly thankful to you, my friend. There are thousands of Rohingya from whom Myanmar government snatched their documents. Many documents were burned during the military attack, and others were left behind during the exodus on this day back in 2017. After the refugee settlement in Bangladesh, Rohingya once again lost the documents they have been safeguarding due to the fire within the refugee camp. When we went to collect the documents, some Rohingya were likely to refuse to provide their documents to us because of the fear of losing their documents again. If we think about all these things into consideration, we can say that countless documents were lost. After all these challenges, we managed to collect enough documents for our project, which still reveal that the Rohingya are the indigenous people of Arkam, and it still reveal our existence. For this project, I wrote a poem based on my experience and on the situation of Rohingya exception. For this poem is written for the project Ek Khaale. Let me read the poem. the identity I uphold. Myanmar denies my identity in fear of my return to my homeland. Bangladesh acknowledges my identity in fear of my prolonged stay within their territory. Meanwhile, the Rakhine ethnic reject my identity in fear of having to share our historical legacy. I will not speak of the term Rohingya that remain unbound in the documents I safeguard during the flames of genocide. I will not mention the page of Rohingya that have been erased from the annals of history, evidence of my existence. I will not highlight the ancestral photograph I stumbled upon years later within my grandparents' dilapidated box. Neither I will remind you of the historical heritages that still endure on the soil of Arthur, obscured by overgrowth and debris. I will not sing the ancient melodies, folk songs, lullabies, and poignant verses that encapsulated the lives and narratives of my forefathers. There exist numerous other substantiations of my identity as a Rohingya, an indigenous inhabitant of Assam. I oath against elaborating on these. Why does my profound affection for Arkan force through my being, permeating my very being? Is it a falsehood? How can I discern the subtle notes of the wind that transverse the sky? The air in Arkan beckoned to me, as if acquainted with me for an eternity. Why does the resonance of my voice echo across the Mayu mountains from far? When I call out, it responds me, seemingly lamenting for me incessantly. Why do the waves of North River until they reach the shore? Is it awaiting to reunite with me? Every crest and sun a yearning for my return. Cherish it, the essence of Arkham. As I engage it, every cell in my body, I found myself seeking refuge in a distant land, directly under the shelter of a tent, away from genocidal landscape where my once beloved home stood. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing your emotions for your home country. And it was so beautifully penned. Thank you for, giving us a sneak peek view to your, to what you feel and how you miss your homeland. I am going to invite Ali to share his story from his family. Ali, uh, if you're there, you can turn on your camera and share. Yes.
Hi everyone, hope you can hear me well. And thanks to APRRN for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my story. And thanks to Greg for this outstanding project that nobody has ever been able to do. And I know I understand how much dedication, how much effort it has taken to preserve what actually Rohingya needs, a visual preservation of their history and stories. Yesterday I was talking about with my mom to re-energize their stories that she used to tell us from her childhood, teenage age, and how she, her brothers got separated for decades, with whom she would never be able to speak until 2005 with the help of internet and mobile phone introduction. Uh, I would highlight one story of how she got separated from her brothers. His name is Liaquat, and he was at around 17. It was in 1979 when the Myanmar military was, conscripting Rohingyas to take as forced labor to carry their rice, their rations, and their ammunition while they were fighting against the resistance group in the mountains. And it was not only him; they would, suddenly, surround a village and detain young people who are teenage or who are able to, carry at the age of being able to carry goods for the military. And he was taken by the military. After 7 days, he returned with a head of a deer. And uh, my grandma would cry looking at him, not because he was able to return, but because he was carrying a beheaded head of a deer, telling him, why you have to carry this for 2 days. You are being released. It would have been better that you have, run for your life and come to safety without this. So in 1982, she got married with my father, who is from Butidong. My mom is from Tongbaza, and she relocated to Butidong after marrying my father. And in 1980s around, she got her first baby, eldest brother. And interestingly, until then, all my grandparents, my father and my mom, all of them had, national registration card. Suddenly in 1994, the government, asked Rohingya people as well as the Rakhine people to visit at particular places to photograph them. They were told that they will be given a different ID card. The fellow Rakhine were given a citizenship card, but the Rohingyas were tricked to give a white card, which is we also know as temporary ID card. And basically, this was the moment when, the national registration card were actually confiscated from the Rohingyas, including my generation, my grandparents. But my father, interestingly, is still stick to, happen to still stick to the national registration certificate, telling that he actually lying to the authorities that he actually lost the card. And this is how most of the Rohingyas actually preserve this kind of document, which you see at the Greg's presentation, because it's not only the national registration card, those were confiscated from Rohingyas. Any documents, including land ownership documents that Rohingya have held into, including passports from, from the previous time, from British, from from the time after the independence. It was actually a pattern how Rohingyas were pushed into a genocide. So I would actually like to read out a letter that one such genocide victim have written to another genocide victim, as it is a we commemorate the Rohingya genocide for 7 years today. So it goes like patterns of our genocide, and it's written by a Rohingya young man who became the victim of genocide to another genocide victim who is in Palestine. So it goes like, Dear Salwa, every day I see the news about what is happening in Gaza. It looks like hell on earth. Children and women being killed, bombs and guns, dead bodies on roads and under the rubble. I hope you're safe, and I pray for you. I know how it feels, Salwa, to have nowhere to go and no one to trust and no one to rescue you. All those with power to help you are busy producing propaganda and excuses. Humanity fades away before your eyes. I know what you are going through, Salwa, because I have gone through it. In your horror, I see the patterns of my tragedy. The patterns that first crave up a pupil and then erase them. Walk with me, Salwa, and I will show you these patterns. Look at this, Salwa. Your October 7 is our August 25. So they say they are responding to October 7th, like nothing ever happened before. With us, they were retaliating to August 25. I was in a high school, my family, miles away from my family and village. Suddenly, the military junta started attacking us. On August 27, 2017, a Rohingya militia of 500 had targeted 30 police posts in Myanmar. The retaliating junta said it was saving the humanity from these 500 so-called goons. It did this by killing thousands of children, saved the humanity by raping thousands of girls and young women, wiping out more than 200 villages that we lived, including mine. They said they were peacekeeping, but killed more than 30,000, forced 1 million of my people out of our land. They said they were defending the country, but systematically raze our villages, erase our futures. They killed those trying to escape to safety. They did what they wanted with our women. They blindfolded and slaughtered our men. They locked our people in their homes. They locked our people in their homes and burned them alive. They boasted and joked about torturing and killing Rohingyas on social media. Does any of this sound familiar to you, Salwa? I was 17, all alone and way away from my family. I cannot ever forget what I saw. People running for their lives, gunshots, bombs, body parts, shrink, screaming, entire villages on fire, bodies of beheaded children, women, and men floating in the Naf River, the dead being eaten by stray dogs. They cut our network. We could not communicate. They used the internet to spread hate and fake news. They did not allow international organizations, aid, and news agencies in. They targeted the wounded by shutting down hospitals. Those who did not leave were burned alive. We walked miles to reach the border, but the border guards wouldn't allow people to cross. I understand their logic. Why should they let us in to their land when we are being killed in our own and by our own, right? Salwa, now many people know about Palestinian history. I have been reading about it too. Let me tell you a bit about Rohingya history, because like your story, ours began a long time ago. Tell me if you recognize the patterns. Our historical land is called Arakan. Arakan was an independent kingdom. We had our own culture, we had harmony among diverse communities. This is how we were before Portuguese, the Mughals, the Burmese, the Japanese, and finally the British colonizers. 1948 is an important year for both of us, Salwa. In 1948, the British petitioned Palestine against your will and then left. The settlers carried on with colonization. Your people were thrown out of your homes and made refugees overnight. The same year, my country too was decolonized by the British. Like Palestinians, they petitioned Arakan and drew an international border through it. Since then, the people of Arakan have bled dry of the harmony we enjoyed before. I learned about your Nakba. Our Nakba was called Nagaming. There followed many other such attacks, all to clear us out, to purify the country. They call us foreigners, illegal immigrants. In our own land, which I remind you was older than the new country that occupied it. The patterns of occupation are something both you and I understand, Salwa. Your people have been living under siege, martial law, and apartheid for years. Since 1962, where Rohingyas have been living under martial law and apartheid. We face a slow-burning genocide, Salwa. We cannot travel out of Arakan. If we escape Myanmar, we cannot come back. Within Arakan, we move from checkpoints to checkpoints only with their permissions. There even is a special armed force set up to harass, abuse, and segregate us. Does any of this sound familiar, Salwa? And of course, there are more. They changed the name of our Arakan state. They changed the names of all our major towns, our historical sites. I know, that is how they erase history, right? Language, culture, how they force us to assimilate to their language, history, and culture. I understand when your pupils say it's better to be killed in our own home than driven out of the land. Our people have been chased from our land since 1940s. 4 million Rohingyas across the world and over 3 million expelled from our own country over and over and over again. Arakan holds just 500,000 people now under a siege, like same you, stripped of citizenship and forgotten. Gaza is called the world's largest open air prison. You do have a few world record. We too have some world records we never wanted. The world's most persecuted people, the world's largest refugee camp, Utupalang. This camp is run by the international community. Those who live in it cannot walk, cannot go to school, survive on $8 a month. Apparently, If we are allowed to work, schooling or food, we wouldn't want to go back. Who will tell them that many would have preferred death to living without a life? Salwa, have you noticed the patterns of their hatred? I see your people being called animals, insect, terrorist. I watch religious leaders justifying the rape of your women and the killing of your children. This reminds me how easily, how casually they killed us. Here in Arakan, we are called Khala. They compare us with animals and insects, constantly call us dirty. Their religious leaders have called on Myanmar to rid itself of Rohingya dirt. Gang rape is laughed off because politicians call our women too dirty to rape. They say we burn our own homes and that babies were buried, are actually dolls. Does this sound familiar, Salvo? Salvo, these patterns reveal something about our allies too. The Rohingya people fearlessly documented the crimes against us. We worked so hard, sacrificed so much to prove to people that we were being destroyed. And in 2017, we received solidarity like we had never seen before. Strikes, protests, media debates, stories, report, books. I remember, my hope went high when high-profile world leaders joined this wave. Everyone said one thing: genocide is happening, genocide is wrong. But like a wave, those rose and then fell away suddenly. Now the selfies the world leaders took with us feel more like publicity stunts. The reports and the articles have become lost in files. People that build their careers on our tragedy have moved up. 7 years on, Salwa, everything has waned like a dream. I fear this might happen to you, Salwa. For now, people are emotional and angry seeing innocent children killed. They protest, write, and join solidarity marches. But eventually, they will lose interest and shift to the battle of their own personal lives. The evil people who plot our destructions know that the time is on their side. Salwa, this is the reality I wanted to be aware of. My biggest fear, Salwa, is how do I deal with the hatred within me? At times, I feel like we are the strongest people on earth. Your people, my people, they try to erase us, yet we thrive. They try to bury us, but we grow. And then I wonder, do I think this to trick my mind when I feel unbearable pain in me? Pain because my insides are dissolving. At times, I cannot sleep because of these thoughts and traumas. At times, I cannot get up and face another day. At times, I think that is better. At times, all I feel is hatred. And I fear this hatred could turn me into something they told about me. I feel like I'm becoming a lesser human. But then I look at a piece of sky, and then somewhere in that blue, I find hope. Hope that after all this darkness, there will be light for you. I hope that in 7 years of time, you will find yourself in a better place than I now. Hope that the patterns of genocide will never, ever be repeated again. I can only hope with all my love. Thank you.
words will be difficult to say after this. So I think, maybe we can just let it steep and let all of us just reflect on it ourselves. It's the last community voice that we have amongst us. It'll be Herula. He is joining us from the camps, about 5 minutes. And then I see that there are no questions, but if there are any, we can quickly take them.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Uh, Thank you, Greg, for your wonderful project that in a project and a documentary project that illuminate our story and existence and struggle. I also extend my deepest gratitude to APRRN and its advocate for making this event possible, where I can amplify the voices of our community. Today, as we gather physically in the camp to remember the countless lives lost to the genocide in Afghan state, I reflect on my commitment since arriving in Bangladesh to raise my voice against the injustice faced by my community and to fight for our rights, dignity, and future. We Rohingya have been facing unimaginable suffering for decades. We have faced systematic persecutions in our homeland, a stripe of citizenship, denied basic human rights, and subjected to brutal violence. The world witnessed the horror of 2017. Villages were abandoned, women were raped, and thousands of our people were killed. Those who survived sought refuge in Bangladesh, feeling to the genocide. Even in the camps, our suffering continues. We live in crowded, squalid conditions with scarce food and limitation healthcare. We amid this suffering, we remain resilient, dreaming of a better future, fighting for our rights. But we can do this alone. We need the world support. Now, let me share a story of our earlier generations, whose name is Aula, also known as Habibullah. He was 19 years old, and when I met with him, and he was born in Tambu, Rakhine State member in Mondo Township. He was one of the oldest Rohingya I ever met in refugee camps. Throughout his life, he witnessed many significant historical events in our country, including Japanese-British War before Burma gained independence. He first became a refugee in 1978 when the Myanmar Army Force launched an operation called Nagami, also known as Dragon King, targeting the Rohingya. The operations involves confiscating possessions, destroying villages, and dispersing mobs. And between February 16th and July 31st, 1978, around 250 Rohingya people, including Aula, whose history I am sharing to you, and his family fled to Bangladesh, where they lived in a temporary refugee camp. They were later repatriated along with 180,000 other Rohingya refugees. He became a refugee for the second time in 1991 when the Tamodo launched another operation called Pitaya, a clean and beautiful nation, which resulted in killing, rape, arbitrary arrest, and the burning of Rohingya villages. Once again, around 250,000 Rohingya, including Aungla, his family, were forced to flee to Bangladesh. 3 years later, about 150,000 Rohingya, including his family, were repatriated to Myanmar, while an estimated 35,000 remain in the registered refugee camp in Bangladesh. In 2017, Aungla was forced to flee to Bangladesh for the third time when the Tamodo committed one of the worst genocide in recent history, causing an estimated 725,000 Rohingya have crossed the border into Bangladesh. He lived in the refugee camp with his sons for 2 months. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 months later in 2017. So my request to the international community and others is that we demand justice for the atrocities committed against us for decades. The perpetrators of the genocide must be held accountable, and the international community must take action to bring them to justice. We demand the right to return to our home with safety and dignity. We want to return to Myanmar, but only when it is safe to do so with our right granted. We demand that our voice be heard. We are not just victims, we are survivors as well. Our stories, experiences, and demands must be central to any discussion about our future. As we remember the victim of genocide worldwide today, let us also remember the Rohingya, and let us commit to ensuring that our suffering is not in vain, that our rights, dignity, and future are protected. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and the story. While we are a little behind on time, but the stories were very beautiful. And if there are any questions, please share them. I haven't got any in the chat in the meanwhile. You have the next 10 minutes. If you have some questions, you can address them directly. Then I have 2 questions. I'll put them in the chat. And yes, I think we do have a question. Please unmute yourself and go ahead. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much for this lovely presentation, Greg. It is a great story and great research. While you were working as a newspaper journalist or the journalist in capacity, so where you had any tough time that you were threatened, arrested by the military government while it was you were doing research in Myanmar?
Hi, yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, actually, I had less challenges probably in Burma than historically I have had in Bangladesh. I mean, I think that uh, fortunately I was able to produce the work that I felt like I needed to produce during all those trips when I was able to travel to Burma. Um, but I think more of the troubles historically for me I've always been encountered in southern Bangladesh. So, but then again, I have to preface that by saying that I mean, all the people from the Rohingya community who I've met with and everything, their security is far much more vulnerable than my own. So I've come from a very privileged kind of position in that sense. But in general, no, I've never had any serious problems or run into serious issues with the authorities.
Yeah. So the reason I asked is I can see a parallel attitude and the type of the operation, what is happening in Myanmar for the Muslim communities and Rohingya is similar in Bhutan, where that was severely oppressed by the military government and the royal family kind of thing. In Bhutan, it was an absolute monarchy. It was 100% protected by them. So there was no opportunity for any journalist to get into that one. So their stories, Burmese stories, were hardly exposed. They were hardly written. It was a shorter story as compared to the Myanmar operation kind of things, but it is very parallel. And then, though it was a short period of time, the what you can say, the intensity of the painfulness is more or less the same.
Yeah, I think even I had an idea that, this could be an example of how such similar, such uh, activities are undertaken, visual histories that are undertaken for other communities as well.
Yeah. I've found that as we've been slowly presenting this project, because there's you know we kept this project quite close for many years, but now over the past 6 months, it's now starting to be shown in a much more public space, and that's been one of the reactions is that you can, share this project and communities from other places all around the world, you know, uh, find some kind of similarity behind it. And I mean, to also to address one of your questions really quickly is that, for so many years, North Rakhine State was basically a vacuum. It was a black hole. I mean, barely any journalists could get access to that, and if you could get access, you were heavily monitored and surveilled by the authorities and everything. But so all of these family documentary heritage materials that have been in possession of the Rohingya families, whether they've been hiding them or preserving them or whatever it is, they've basically have been, again, just like Rohingya themselves, they've been trapped in this black hole that is North Rakhine State for so many years. But what has come out of the events of 2017 is that so many Rohingya were pushed out of North Rakhine State during 2017, each people carrying little shreds of visual evidence into a space that actually was accessible to people to have access to if you actually asked. And one of the surprising things that I encountered with the team members, Anamul included, is that a lot of people who we met, they've never been asked for these materials before. They've only been asked for the stories of the tragedy and the violence that's been committed against them. I mean, rarely do you find Rohingya actually being asked to show materials that show about the life of this community. And so this project has been really fortunately placed in a really great position at a really fortunate time, to kind of harness these materials while they're there. But also at the same time, every single year there's massive fires that sweep through the camps and flooding that takes place in the camps. And my heart breaks when I see the fires and the floods, not just for the loss of shelters and the challenges that families are faced with, but also from the perspective of this project, the unknown amount of documentary evidence that families have possessed with them that's totally destroyed now that it's outside of Burma. So yeah, I hope that answers a bit of your question.
We have one more question. Please unmute yourself and go ahead. Mujib Khan.
Thank you so much for organizing these events on the 7th anniversary of Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day. Actually, I would like to ask some questions from the APRRN for whether they have involvements or not in investigating the reasons attack against the Rohingya that has happened in Maundo on 5th August. So my question will be is that from the APRRN, is there any fact-checking or analytical teams that has been involved to investigate all the crimes against humanity that has been going on the Rohingya community? If it is not, my request will be for the APRRN to form a teams to investigate all these things and report to the relevant agencies to help and to get the justice as soon as possible for the Rohingya. So I would like to know that, are you documenting all the things that is going on Rohingya that has faced recently? I mean, as you know, the more than 200 Rohingya have been killed, whereas involve women and children, elderly people, and disabilities, and innocent peoples. So it is a very highly concerning tragedy that the Rohingya has recently faced. So this should be highlighted from the APRRN research teams and the investigation team. This will be my request to you. Thank you.
Can I answer that, Amrita?
Yes.
Thank you for raising the concern, Mujib Khan. So just to let you know, APRRN is not an individual or it's a few people. It's a member-led network. We have 280 closer to members across 30 countries in Asia Pacific region. Your points are well taken. But to answer your question very briefly is that we have not been directly investigating as the secretary of APRRN, but we have members working across. We have members who do research, academia, and different people. And just be assured is that although we are not directly investigating it, we are monitoring and getting information from the ground, from our partner organization, INGO, located inside Myanmar, also other organizations based in Arakan as well. Also our members, some of them who are also joining here on this call are very active. But what we have been doing recently is that, I don't know if you've seen, when members took the initiative, raising awareness and producing press release and statements calling on urgent actions by international communities and organizing that's what we have been doing. But I don't want to take so much of your time here. We have already gone over time. Please feel free to reach out to us individually, and if you have any other suggestions and ideas where you see APRRN can have added values without reinventing the wheel, or where APRRN can complement the existing work of investigation work happening for Rohingyas ongoing. Over. Thanks.
Thank you, Hafsa. If we do not have any more questions, then Hafsa, please do the closing. Thank you so much, and thank you, Greg.
Well, I don't know how to pick up from this all after powerful presentation and statement. It's just, being myself a Rohingya, it is difficult to pick it up and collect my thoughts and gather, but thank you. everyone who are present here, joining the webinar and the presenter. I can speak for all of us, I think, including myself and many other Rohingyas who are now, as of now, being trapped inside APRRN, who are now being trapped in the refugee camp and host refugee communities. What we feel from time to time is that there has never, ever been a groundbreaking, significant interventions from international communities or from the states, even at the times of genocides. I have never, ever heard and seen any emergency intakes, any emergency, immediate diplomatic, political intervention that would actually have some sort of impact on Rohingyas. I have always asked the question to myself, why? When I have witnessed many other, great example of emergency intake, immediate protection for things like this happen across the globe, unfortunately, why? Why there was never and still no equitable humanitarian and diplomatic political response to Rohingyas as in other arising, emerging, vulnerable, severe situations across the globe. I say this also coming from a place of humility and appreciation of the work that other allies and you guys have been doing here on the call and other members doing tirelessly for the plight of Rohingya, but we are exhausted now. From all the decades that we have experienced, endured, and witnessed the injustice and atrocities against us, we are still fighting with every last strength left in us for our community's future. So one day, the identity and our belongings will be acknowledged and our right will be restored. We will continue to do so. But please stand in solidarity with us. Please surround us with your support. The way to freedom and liberation and restoring Rohingya, from our perspective, that requires a whole of society approach. We can't do this alone. But I have to tell you that I have really come across another communities that is as resilient, as competent as Rohingya, amidst of everything that we have been through. We are so capable of rebuilding our community. But again, I must repeat, please surround us, support us, stand in solidarity with us in reclaiming our rights again. What we Rohingya request is not a privilege, it is our very right that has been long overdue to be restored. And I hope this event has reminded us not to normalize the ongoing genocides that is still going against Rohingya. It has not stopped yet, it is ongoing. Please do not normalize it. Please do not think it is over now. And I hope this is the day that we promise to the countless innocent lives, Rohingyas' lives that have been taken, still being taken during genocide 2027, during 2012, and as of now, as a promise that we will continue to fight for the plight of Rohingyas until the day that justice is being served, until the day that Rohingya can go back where safe and dignified repatriation has happened. We hope that this event will remind the international communities, including the states from Southeast Asia, will take the actions that will actually reflect the international obligations to uphold the dignity and the human rights of Rohingya, not just talk. And thank you so much for being with us today. And have a good evening, have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.